The grand halls of the HFY Imperial Palace shimmered with golden light as towering alien guards lined the entrance. Inside, at the center of a vast chamber, Princess Velora HFY sat on an ornate throne, her piercing violet eyes fixed on the small human standing before her. Nathan Carter, the human diplomat, felt the weight of countless alien stares drilling into him. The HFY were a proud, warrior race, and humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. Many here believed humans were weak, unworthy of negotiating with an empire as powerful as theirs. Nathan had heard the whispers on his way in, mocking laughter, hushed voices calling him a coward for not bringing weapons. But he stood tall, his dark suit a sharp contrast to the heavy battle armor worn by the HFY officials. He was here to negotiate peace, not war. Velora finally spoke, her voice cold and commanding. "You come here seeking an alliance, human. But tell me, why should the HFY Empire recognize a species that hides behind words instead of strength?" A ripple of approval swept through the room. The HFY valued combat above all. To them, strength determined respect. Nathan expected this challenge, and he met Velora's gaze without hesitation. "Because true strength isn't just in war," Nathan replied, his voice steady. "It's in knowing when to fight and when to seek peace. War destroys. Peace builds." Some of the warriors scoffed, but Velora's expression remained unreadable. Before she could respond, a loud explosion suddenly shook the chamber. The floor trembled as smoke filled the air. Screams and shouts echoed through the hall. The anti-human faction had attacked. Nathan reacted instantly. He didn't run, didn't hide. He moved toward the danger. He saw a shadow moving on the upper balcony, an assassin aiming a plasma weapon directly at Velora. Without thinking, Nathan lunged forward. He grabbed the princess's arm and pulled her down just as the plasma bolt fired. It narrowly missed her head and scorched the throne behind them. Guards rushed to intercept the assassin, but Nathan stayed low, shielding Velora's body with his own. For the first time in her life, Velora was speechless. No HFY warrior had ever protected her like this. She was trained to fight, to defend herself. Yet this human, who was not a warrior, had risked his life for her without hesitation. As the chaos settled, Nathan released her and stood up, brushing the dust from his jacket. He gave her a small, confident smile. "I think that answers your question, Princess." Velora stared at him, stunned. Humans were different. The palace guards quickly subdued the assassin, dragging the attacker away as the smoke cleared. The council chamber, once filled with proud warriors, now buzzed with shock. The attack had been sudden, but the biggest surprise was not the attempt on Princess Velora's life. It was the human diplomat's bravery. Velora slowly rose to her feet, her violet eyes locked on Nathan Carter. She had expected this man to cower, to rely on his guards, to let others fight for him. But he had done the opposite. He had protected her, a HFY princess, without thinking twice. The room was silent as Nathan adjusted his suit, completely calm despite what had just happened. He turned to Velora and smirked slightly. "I hope that wasn't part of the official welcome," he said. A few warriors growled at his boldness, but Velora lifted a hand, silencing them. She studied him, her mind racing. Why would a human risk his life for her? Among her people, self-preservation came first. A warrior fought for their own honor, not for others. And yet this man, this non-warrior, had thrown himself into danger for her. "Foolish," she muttered, her voice softer than usual. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "You could have died," Velora said, stepping closer. "You are here to negotiate, not fight. You have no weapons, no armor. What made you think you could stop an assassin?" Nathan shrugged. "I didn't think. I just acted." Velora frowned. His words made no sense. HFY warriors always calculated risk before making a move. Acting without thinking was reckless. Yet Nathan had done it for her. One of the council members, A large, battle-scarred general named Korath stepped forward, his deep voice filled with suspicion. "Perhaps the human knew of the attack beforehand," he growled. "Perhaps this was all a trick to gain our trust." Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Nathan sighed, shaking his head. "Of course. I saved the princess's life, and now I'm a suspect." Vailora narrowed her eyes. She did not trust humans easily, but something about Nathan made her hesitate. He did not seem like a man who played games. She turned to Korath. "I will decide who to trust," she said firmly. "Not you." Korath clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Vailora faced Nathan again. "You will remain under palace watch until this investigation is complete. If you are innocent, you will be treated as an honored guest." Nathan nodded, smiling slightly. "I'll take that as progress." As the guards escorted him to his quarters, Vailora watched him go. Something about this human was different, and she intended to find out why. Nathan Carter woke up in the small but elegant guest room assigned to him in the HFY Palace. The events of the previous day still played in his mind. The explosion, the assassin, and that moment he stepped in to shield Princess Vailora. Despite the danger, Nathan felt no regret. A loud knock on the metal door pulled him from his thoughts. Before he could answer, the door slid open. Princess Vailora stood there, dressed not in regal robes but in a form-fitting combat uniform. Her hair was tied back, and a long energy blade hung at her side. She looked less like a royal figure and more like a soldier ready for battle. "Come with me," she ordered. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too." Vailora didn't smile. She motioned for him to follow and turned sharply, expecting him to obey. He hesitated for a moment, then got up and walked after her. They passed through long corridors filled with alien guards and officials who all stopped and stared at the human diplomat. Their gazes were filled with skepticism, as if wondering how such a fragile being could stand among them. Nathan ignored their looks and focused on Vailora's quick pace. Eventually, they entered a massive training arena. The scent of scorched metal and sweat filled the air. HFY warriors, each standing taller and broader than Nathan, were sparring with energy weapons and engaging in intense physical drills. The clashing of blades and the grunts of warriors echoed throughout the chamber. Vailora stopped and turned to him. "You speak of human bravery and ingenuity," she said, her voice cold. "But I want to see how you handle yourself among warriors. Words mean nothing here." Nathan frowned. "I'm not a fighter. I'm a diplomat." "Exactly. So show me what makes humans worth listening to." Nathan hesitated. He wasn't trained for combat, especially not against aliens twice his size. But he wasn't about to back down in front of her. He took a deep breath and said, "Fine. Let's see what we can learn." Vailora motioned to a large HFY warrior named Krenner. The towering figure approached, smirking down at Nathan. "This is your chance, human," Krenner said, handing Nathan a practice blade. Nathan gripped the weapon. It was heavier than he expected. Krenner attacked without warning, swinging his blade with terrifying speed. Nathan barely managed to dodge, stumbling as the blade whooshed past. He held up his weapon, blocking the next strike with sheer instinct. The other warriors chuckled, seeing the human's clumsy movements. But Nathan didn't give up. He moved swiftly, using his smaller size to avoid Krenner's powerful swings. He wasn't winning, but he wasn't being crushed either. Vailora watched closely. She didn't expect him to win. She just wanted to see how he reacted under pressure. And what she saw made her pause. Nathan was resourceful. He didn't rely on brute force, but on quick thinking and strategy. When the sparring session ended, Nathan was out of breath but still standing. Krenner gave him a nod, impressed by the human's resilience. Vailora stepped forward. "You surprised me," she admitted. "Perhaps there is more to humans than I thought." Nathan smiled despite his exhaustion. "Maybe you'll believe me next time I say we're not just words." As they left the arena, Vailora found herself questioning everything she had been taught about humans. They were more than she had imagined. Nathan Carter had barely begun to recover from the rigorous sparring session when he noticed the growing tension around the palace. HFY warriors whispered in hushed tones, and guards seemed to increase in number. Nathan felt the change in the air, but no one would tell him what was going on. Princess Velora was also on edge. She knew her people's honor-bound nature often made them resist change, but now it felt different. Something was brewing, and it wasn't just discontent over a human diplomat's presence. The palace was too quiet, too tense. Late one evening, as Nathan wandered the palace corridors, he overheard a heated argument. He stopped near a corner and leaned against the wall, listening carefully. "The human is a threat," one deep voice hissed. "He's done nothing wrong," another retorted. "That's exactly what makes him dangerous. He's gaining favor. If he convinces the princess. I'm not interested in politics. You know as well as I do what needs to be done." Nathan's heart sank. The voices didn't name names, but it was clear they were talking about him. He quietly stepped away, keeping to the shadows, and headed back to his room. Velora, meanwhile, was digging into palace records and reports. Something about Nathan's presence had stirred old tensions among her people. She had noticed the way General Korath had spoken to him, his words laced with suspicion, his stance just a little too hostile. Korath was known for his strong opinions, but this time, Velora suspected more than just stubborn pride. She called in her most trusted advisor, a senior warrior named Eric, and asked for his insight. Eric, always loyal and cautious, confirmed her fears. "There are whispers of a plot to frame the human," he said. "Some believe he's here to weaken the empire, to infiltrate our traditions. They think if they discredit him, your father will end these negotiations altogether." Velora's face hardened. She didn't trust easily, especially when it came to humans. But Nathan had saved her life and proven his courage. She would not let him be falsely accused. In the dead of night, she visited Nathan's quarters. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, clearly troubled. When he saw her enter, he sat up. "Let me guess," he said. "I'm not as welcome here as I thought." Velora crossed her arms. "You've made enemies. Some believe your bravery is a trick, a way to manipulate us. They plan to frame you for a crime, an attack on our power station." Nathan raised his eyebrows. "An attack that hasn't even happened yet." "Yes," she said, "but it will, and they'll make sure you're blamed." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. So much for diplomacy. Velora's gaze softened. "I don't know if I can fully trust you, but I'll find the truth. Until then, stay alert." As she left, Nathan watched her go. For the first time, he felt not just like a diplomat in a foreign land, but like someone who truly needed an ally. Nathan woke early the next morning, still uneasy from Velora's warning. He had come here hoping to build an alliance, not to get caught in the middle of palace intrigue. But it was clear now that certain powerful figures wanted him gone. He spent the morning in his quarters, reviewing what little data he had on the HFY's political structure. There were dozens of noble families, each with their own ambitions, and General Korath was one of the most vocal traditionalists. Nathan remembered the general's cold glare from the first meeting. It wasn't just distrust. Korath viewed humanity as a direct threat to HFY culture. Later, Velora summoned him to a private chamber. She stood by a tall window, her hands clasped behind her back, the sunlight casting a golden glow over her sharp features. "I've been investigating the attack," she began, turning to face him. "The one they plan to frame you for." "And?" Nathan asked, stepping closer. "The evidence is suspicious," Velora admitted. "General Korath's faction has recently moved troops near the power station. It's not proof of sabotage, but it's unusual. If he truly believes you're dangerous, he might see framing you as a necessary step to protect our empire." Nathan nodded slowly. "So what's next?" Velora hesitated. "I can't accuse Korath without solid proof. He's too respected among the nobles. If I make a false move, it could weaken my position, Then we find the proof, Nathan said firmly. Whatever it takes. Valora raised an eyebrow. You would risk further danger to clear your name. I didn't come here to run, Nathan replied. And besides, if Korath wins, this peace deal falls apart. That helps no one. For a moment, Valora studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. There is a secure data vault in the palace. Korath's communications might be stored there. If I can access it, I may find the evidence we need. Nathan frowned. And you'll do this alone? Of course. It's not your fight, Valora said sharply. Nathan shook his head. It became my fight the moment they tried to frame me. Valora tilted her head slightly. You truly are strange, human. Most beings would look out for themselves first. You, however, you don't act as expected. Nathan gave a small smile. I've heard that before. Later that night, the two made their way through the palace's labyrinth of corridors, avoiding the main guards. Valora led the way, her knowledge of the palace layout keeping them hidden. Nathan followed closely, his senses alert for any signs of trouble. When they reached the vault, Valora began working on the security console. Nathan kept watch, listening for approaching footsteps. The tension was thick, but neither of them spoke. Finally, Valora retrieved the files. As she scanned the data, her eyes narrowed. It's worse than I thought, she said. Korath isn't just trying to sabotage the peace talks. He's preparing for war. Nathan's stomach sank. The stakes were higher than ever. They needed to act fast. Nathan and Valora didn't have long to process what they'd uncovered. As they reviewed Korath's encrypted orders, an alert echoed through the palace. Guards were converging on their location. They know we're here, Valora said, quickly transferring the files to a portable datapad. We need to move. Nathan looked around for an exit. Which way? Valora led him down a narrow hallway, her blade in hand. This way. There's a service tunnel ahead. The sound of boots pounding against metal floors grew louder behind them. The guards weren't far, and Nathan's heart raced as they hurried down the dim corridor. As they reached the tunnel entrance, a squad of guards appeared, blocking their path. Valora didn't hesitate. With a sharp command in her native tongue, she charged forward, her energy blade glowing brightly. The guards hesitated, surprised by her sudden aggression, giving Nathan just enough time to slip past them and into the tunnel. Valora quickly followed, sealing the door behind her. This tunnel will lead us to the lower levels. If we're lucky, they won't have access down there. Nathan nodded, catching his breath. What's the plan once we get out? We find Eric, she replied. He's one of the few who might believe us. With his support, we can present the evidence before my father. The tunnel was long and winding, lit only by faint emergency lights. Nathan struggled to keep up with Valora's quick pace. So, does this happen often? He asked, trying to lighten the mood. Breaking into your own palace, running from guards. Valora glanced back, her expression neutral. You get used to it. Nathan chuckled despite the situation. Good to know. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, the air grew colder, the walls covered in condensation. They reached a junction where Valora hesitated. This way, she said finally, choosing the left passage. But as they turned the corner, they were met with another squad of guards. These were Korath's men, and their weapons were drawn. Valora and Nathan froze. The guards didn't speak. Instead, they stepped forward, weapons ready. Drop the datapad, one of them ordered. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Princess. Valora tightened her grip on the datapad. It's over, Korath, she said firmly. I have the proof. Your plan won't work. The lead guard laughed. You won't leave here alive. Nathan glanced at Valora. What's the plan now? She smirked, raising her blade. The plan is not to die. Before the guards could react, Valora lunged forward, her blade humming through the air. Nathan followed her lead, grabbing a loose piece of pipe from the ground and swinging it at the nearest guard. They fought their way through the squad, the tunnel echoing with the clash of weapons and shouts. Valora's skill was unmatched, and Nathan's quick thinking allowed them to gain the upper hand. Finally, the last guard fell, and Valora turned to Nathan. "Still alive?" He nodded, breathing heavily. "Barely." Valora handed him the datapad. "Good. Let's keep it that way." As they pressed forward, Nathan realized something. Valora wasn't just a princess or a warrior. She was a leader, someone who would fight for what was right, even when it meant risking everything. Nathan and Valora emerged from the dark, winding tunnels into a less guarded wing of the palace. With the evidence in hand, they now faced their biggest challenge: convincing Emperor Xerxes, Valora's father, to act against General Korath. Valora led the way, her steps confident despite the risks. Nathan followed closely, clutching the datapad that held the damning proof. The halls felt quieter than usual, the guards more alert, as if sensing the growing tension within the palace walls. As they approached the Emperor's audience chamber, Valora paused and turned to Nathan. "When we go in there, let me speak first. My father respects strength, but he also values clear reasoning. I will present the evidence, and you can back me up if needed." Nathan nodded. "Understood. I'm just hoping he listens." Valora's expression softened briefly. "He will. I'll make sure of it." They stepped through the tall, gilded doors into the audience chamber. The room was vast, lined with banners representing the Empire's greatest victories. At the far end, seated on a high throne, was Emperor Xerxes. His presence was as imposing as the room itself, with his broad shoulders, stern gaze, and ornate ceremonial armor. Valora and Nathan approached, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The Emperor's eyes shifted to his daughter, and for a brief moment, a hint of warmth crossed his face. Then his gaze fell on Nathan, and his expression hardened. "Valora," Xerxes said, his deep voice commanding, "you have brought the human diplomat before me. Why?" "Father," Valora began, her tone steady, "there is a plot within our ranks to sabotage the peace negotiations. General Korath has been orchestrating an attack on our own power station to frame the human envoy." Xerxes raised an eyebrow. "Korath? A trusted general." Valora stepped forward, holding out the datapad. "The proof is here. This contains intercepted communications and troop movements. It was no coincidence that the human was accused of sabotage even before any attack occurred. Korath seeks to disrupt the alliance because he believes it will weaken our traditions." The Emperor took the datapad and reviewed its contents. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the device. Nathan stood quietly, resisting the urge to speak. He could feel the weight of every eye in the chamber. Xerxes looked up, his expression unreadable. "This is serious," he said slowly. "If these claims are true, Korath has betrayed not only the council, but the Empire itself." Valora nodded. "He has, and I stand ready to face him in combat if it comes to that. But first, I ask that you use your authority to confront him and halt his plans before they cause irreparable damage." The Emperor regarded her for a long moment, then turned his gaze to Nathan. "Human," he said, his tone sharp, "you have risked much by coming here. Tell me, why did you not simply run when accused?" Nathan met Xerxes' piercing gaze. "Because I came here for peace, and running would only prove those who doubt us right. If humanity is to be seen as more than opportunists, we need to stand our ground and show we can be trusted, even when the odds are against us." Xerxes leaned back in his throne, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Nathan's face. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. I will summon Korath and demand answers. If the evidence holds, he will face justice. But Valora, know that this will divide the council. Be prepared." Valora straightened. "I understand, Father." As the Emperor dismissed them, Nathan felt a wave of relief, though he knew the hardest part was yet to come. They had presented their case, but confronting Korath would be a battle of its own. The chamber filled with the low hum of the Empire's ceremonial energy blades. On one side stood Princess Velora, her weapon glowing bright, her stance firm and steady. Across from her loomed General Korath, his hulking frame radiating strength, his blade sparking with anticipation. This was no ordinary battle. It was a duel for honor, a fight to reveal the truth. For centuries, the HFY had settled disputes with these duels. Today, Velora intended to prove Korath's betrayal not just with words, but with victory. Nathan stood at the edge of the dueling ground, his heart racing. He had protested Velora's decision to challenge Korath, but she had been firm. "If I win," she had told him, "the evidence will no longer be questioned. My father and the council will have no choice but to believe us." Korath, for his part, seemed confident. "You should have stayed silent, Princess," he growled, raising his blade. "This will be over quickly." The duel began. Korath charged, his blade slicing through the air with incredible force. Velora moved gracefully, dodging his heavy strikes. Her speed and precision kept her ahead, but Korath was relentless. His attacks were powerful, each swing intended to crush her defenses. Nathan couldn't look away. Every clash of blades sent sparks flying, illuminating Velora's determined expression. She wasn't fighting just for herself. She was fighting for the truth, for justice, and, in a way, for the fragile alliance Nathan had come to build. As the duel wore on, it became clear that Velora wasn't relying solely on strength. She was reading Korath's movements, adjusting her strategy with each attack. Where Korath was brute force, Velora was calculation and finesse. Finally, she saw her opening. As Korath lunged forward, Velora sidestepped and delivered a precise strike to his weapon's hilt. Sparks flew as his blade fell from his hand, skidding across the floor. The chamber fell silent. Korath dropped to one knee, breathing heavily, his face twisted with frustration. "You think this proves anything?" he spat. "You're still just a knave, Princess. The council will never—" "Enough!" Emperor Xerx's voice boomed. He had watched the duel in silence until now, his piercing gaze fixed on Korath. "Velora has won by the rules of our people. You have no right to speak further." The Emperor stepped forward, holding up the data pad Velora and Nathan had risked their lives to retrieve. "This evidence is clear," he said, his tone heavy with authority. "You have conspired against the Empire, endangered our people, and nearly destroyed the fragile trust we have with humanity. Your actions will not go unpunished." Korath lowered his head, defeated. The Emperor turned to Velora and Nathan. "This is far from over," he said. "But today you have shown courage, determination, and honor. Our people may still have a future of peace." Velora lowered her blade, breathing deeply. She glanced at Nathan, a hint of relief in her eyes. He smiled, giving her a small nod. They had taken a step forward, but they both knew the journey wasn't over. After Korath's defeat, the tension in the palace only grew stronger. The council members whispered in corners, and guards patrolled more frequently. The Emperor's declaration of Korath's guilt should have brought calm, but instead it seemed to fuel unrest. Nathan stayed close to Velora, knowing that even though they had won the duel, their fight was far from over. The evidence against Korath had convinced the Emperor, but many in the council were loyal to the general and still questioned the human's presence. Late one evening, as the palace quieted down, Nathan noticed a shift in Velora's demeanor. She seemed more alert, her eyes scanning every shadowed corner. "What's wrong?" Nathan asked, his voice low. Velora didn't look at him, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. "Korath may be defeated, but he still has supporters. If they believe they have nothing to lose, they might strike against us directly." Nathan frowned. "And you think that's going to happen tonight?" Velora's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't think. I know." As if on cue, the lights in their wing of the palace flickered and went out, plunging the corridors into darkness. Nathan's instincts kicked in, and he stepped back, pressing himself against the wall. Valora drew her blade, its soft glow the only source of light. A faint noise echoed down the hall. Heavy footsteps, too quiet to be a normal patrol. Valora motioned for Nathan to stay silent, then crept toward the sound. Nathan followed at a distance, his senses heightened. Suddenly, a group of armed figures emerged from the shadows. Korath's loyalists. They moved swiftly, weapons drawn, their faces hidden by helmets. Valora reacted instantly, her blade clashing against their weapons. "Nathan, get back," she ordered. But Nathan didn't retreat. Instead, he grabbed a metal rod from the wall and used it to block an attacker aiming for Valora's flank. The two fought side by side, Valora's skill and Nathan's quick thinking keeping them one step ahead of the ambush. One of the loyalists managed to land a blow, knocking Nathan to the ground. The attacker raised his weapon, ready to strike, but Valora spun around and disarmed him with a precise strike. Nathan scrambled to his feet, refusing to stay down. Eventually, the last of the loyalists fell or fled. The corridor was silent again, save for their labored breathing. Valora turned to Nathan, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have stayed," she said, though there was no anger in her voice. Nathan wiped sweat from his brow. "And leave you to deal with that alone? Not a chance." Valora's gaze softened slightly. "Your bravery continues to surprise me, human." He smiled faintly. "Just trying to keep up with you, princess." Valora sheathed her blade. "We need to report this to my father immediately. Korath's supporters won't stop until they're dealt with. And after tonight, I'm sure the Emperor will believe us." Together, they made their way back to the Emperor's chamber. The threat wasn't over, but Nathan and Valora had proven again that they were stronger together. By the next morning, the palace was a hive of activity. Loyalists were arrested, Korath's remaining supporters fled, and the council gathered once more under Emperor Xerxes' command. This time, there was no question of Nathan's innocence or Valora's determination. The evidence, combined with the betrayal of Korath's faction, had shifted the tide. Nathan stood beside Valora in the great hall as the Emperor addressed the council. The atmosphere was heavy, the tension thick, but there was also a sense of resolution in the air. "Korath's betrayal has brought shame upon our empire," Xerxes declared, his voice firm. "But it has also revealed the strength of those who stand for truth. My daughter, Valora, has proven her honor beyond question, and the human diplomat, Nathan Carter, has shown bravery and loyalty in the face of great danger." Nathan felt the weight of the Emperor's words. Just weeks ago, he had walked into this palace as an outsider, unsure if humanity would be taken seriously. Now he was standing shoulder to shoulder with Valora as a recognized ally. Valora stepped forward, addressing the council. "We cannot move forward while clinging to the past. General Korath sought to keep us isolated, but the galaxy is changing. We must adapt. The humans offer more than just words. They bring creativity, determination, and a desire for peace. If we are to thrive, we must build bridges, not walls." Some council members murmured in agreement, while others remained stoic. But the fear and suspicion that had once dominated the room was fading. Nathan took a deep breath and spoke. "Your Highness, esteemed counselors," he said, his voice steady. "This alliance isn't just about humans and Exodvani working together. It's about showing the galaxy that different species can find common ground, that we can overcome our differences to create something stronger than any of us alone." The room fell silent. The Emperor regarded Nathan for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he rose from his throne, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. "Valora and Nathan have convinced me," Xerxes said. "The Exodvani Empire will honor this alliance. We will work with the humans to ensure stability and growth for both our peoples." A wave of relief washed over Nathan. It wasn't just the words of an agreement, it was the beginning of something new. Valora turned to Nathan, a small smile on her lips. Looks like you've earned your place among us, human. Nathan smiled back. I had a good teacher. The Emperor dismissed the council, but as the members filed out, Nathan stayed behind with Valora. They stood in the vast, ornate chamber, the weight of their journey settling over them. You know, Valora said, her tone light for the first time. When you first arrived, I thought you were a fool. A fragile, naive human trying to play diplomat among warriors. Nathan chuckled. And now? Valora's smile grew faintly. Now, I see someone who understands that strength isn't always about who holds the biggest blade. It's about who has the courage to stand for what's right, even when it seems impossible. Nathan nodded. And what about you? The fierce princess who risked everything to prove the truth. Valora glanced at him, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. I suppose we both learned something about each other. As they left the chamber, side by side, the alliance between humans and HFY wasn't just a treaty. It was a promise. A chance for two very different species to build a future together, starting with a human diplomat and an alien princess who dared to trust each other.